The gap between who we are and who we must appear to be. We like to answer the question of what makes us human with our best qualities: empathy, creativity, and resilience. But the more honest answer lives somewhere darker and far more universal. We are defined by our capacity for self-deception and our overwhelming need to belong, even at the cost of our own integrity. Through Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman and Tim O'Brien's On the Rainy River, we meet two men, destroyed not by villains or fate, but by the gap between who they are and who they must feel they must appear to be. To be human is to live inside that gap, and the struggle to close it is what defines us. Willy Loman's entire existence is built on performance. He doesn't just want success, he wants to look successful, and he has confused the two so completely that he can no longer tell them apart. Miller gives us this directly: be liked and you'll never want. Not skilled, not honest, but to be liked. It is a philosophy that reduces a human being to a social reflection. Willie's sales career is mediocre, his sons are adrift, and his marriage is held together by a wife too loyal to contradict him. Yet, he speaks as though greatness is perpetually just around the corner. He doesn't perform confidence because he is hiding failure. He performs it because he genuinely cannot see the failure clearly. Miller makes this visible through structure itself. The play times constantly collapses. Past and present bleed together without warning. Because this is how Willie experiences reality. He doesn't reminisce, he relives. The architecture of the play tells us what Willie cannot admit. He is a man who has lost the ability to distinguish between what was, what is, and what he wishes were true. The public image is the easier role. Humanity is in what it costs to maintain it. And so when his son Biff tells him directly, "I am not a leader of men, Willie, and neither are you," Willie cannot absorb it. He deflects, rages, and dies still believing his own story. Tim O'Brien. Tim O'Brien's story approaches the same crisis from the opposite direction. Where Willie cannot see himself clearly, O'Brien sees himself too clearly, and what he sees paralyzes him. Drafted into a war he considers unjust, he drives to the Canadian border, sits in a boat staring at the shore, and does not cross. His explanation is one of the most devastating confessions in American literature. I was a coward, I went to war. He is not saying he was afraid of combat, he is saying he was afraid of social judgment, afraid of his town, his parents, and the word draft dodger following him for his life. The pressure to conform doesn't announce itself as cowardice. It arrives dressed as duty, expectation, and the quiet dread of becoming someone your community no longer recognizes. O'Brien knows what is right. He chooses what is safe, and he never forgives himself for it. This is not just a literary pattern, it is a documented human one. Research published in Frontiers in Psychology found that people consistently modify their self-presentation to meet perceived social expectations, and the gap between who we are privately and who we present publicly is a leading driver of anxiety and diminished well-being. A separate peer-reviewed study described what researchers call the presented self, a mental image we construct and protect at a real psychological cost, one that over time can crowd out the authentic self entirely. Willy Loman and Tim O'Brien are literary characters, but the mechanisms that undoes them has been measured in labs. It would be easy to judge both men, but that instinct is worth examining because judgment is comfortable. It creates distance, it lets us treat their failures as character flaws rather than mirrors. I know this from experience. There was a moment in a group discussion in a social class last year where someone said something I was certain was wrong. I had read the text, I had the evidence, and I knew the counter argument. And I said nothing. Not because I couldn't find the words, but because everyone else was nodding, and I didn't want to be the person who made things awkward. I performed agreement. It cost me nothing in that moment, and something small but real afterward, the particular discomfort of knowing you choose comfort over honesty. That is not so different from Willie's desperate need to be liked, or O'Brien's terror of his own town. its judgment. The scale is smaller, the mechanism is identical, which means the question was never really about them. It was about the moment you recognize yourself in the story and what you decide to do next. So here's the question I want you to leave with, and I mean it as a real question, not a rhetorical one. Who are you performing right now? Not on the stage, in this room, in this version of yourself you brought here today. Because Willie Loman didn't become a tragedy the day he died. He became one the day he decided being liked mattered more than being honest. O'Brien didn't lose himself at the border. He lost himself the moment he let other people's voices drown out his own. We are the only species that can examine the gap between who we are and who we must pretend to be.